Yeah. Smell like quarantine spirit, am I right? Yeah, yeah. Less stress, let your mind be free. Shift when the fog lifts, you can finally see. There's a feedback loop that delay like an echo. Tune your frequency up and let go. Loud and clear is how you need to hear. And reason disappear when you feed the fear. There's a feedback loop, the warp like distortion. Keep your mind sharp like a swordsman.
Hey, gentlemen.
Hello.
I love
How's it
that.
going? Thank you.
Yeah.
That was the fruit of my labor last night until midnight. That's why I was up so late. So yeah. So welcome to another episode of the Unashamed Truth podcast. Thank you guys for joining us, Joey and Randy. For those of you who watched the podcast before, you guys may remember Joey from a few episodes and Randy as well, who joined us for a few episodes before our hiatus. So we just wanted to thank you guys for making the time to be here tonight. Unfortunately, Dwight's not with us yet. Hopefully, we'll see if maybe he's going to join us on the podcast a bit later. Yeah, so thank you everybody for tuning in this week as we dive into the topic at hand of mental health.
Yes.
Yeah. Before getting into the topic, I just want to find out, as usual, how the guys are doing.
It's hot, man. So, when we moved to Canada, my mom said, it's going to be a cold place. We're going to move to a cold place. It's going to be all right. They didn't tell me that it's going to be this hot. Okay? And before all my white friends say, don't you come from Africa? Yes, I do. But they didn't do it like this, okay? I've been here for 20 years. I've been traumatized. That's how I'm feeling.
See, Gift even has a Hawaiian shirt to prove that he's disconnected with his African culture, and he's embraced Canadian warm weather culture, which is you wear whatever's left over at the at the stores that feels nice and light.
That's true.
Yeah. Randy, how about you? How's it going?
Man, I've been feeling good too. Mainly trying to keep excited, with like the routine of working from home and these other things, trying to keep it exciting by adding new adventures, So for me, that's like playing a little bit of guitar and that sort of thing, just keeping myself sharp.
Yeah, to prevent yourself from going stir crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I have to go on a lot of walks. I'm like a dog. I have to go on like 3 walks a day.
Really?
Yeah, man.
Do I make the joke or not? I was going to say, who picks up after you? And how about you, Joey?
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
Good.
Same thing, just trying to get through the summer, working from home as well.
Yeah. I think I'm
a few weeks ago, so I'm writing a lot.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Okay,
that's really good. Yeah, I think I'm fine. Oh, sorry, no. I was going to say that I'm starting to find the work from home routine a little much now. I guess it's a little fitting with the topic because that's been something that a lot of employers and a lot of people have kind of been looking out for is the signs that like this is getting to be a bit much. Fortunately, as the viewers know, like we moved my wife and I to a bigger space than we were initially. So that's been great in the sense that like, if we get locked down a second time, we're not going to be kind of like breathing over each other's neck, breathing down each other's necks. But the challenge, has been just a little bit the balance with the kids and stuff like that. Fortunately, we're blessed to have, great family and stuff like that, and parents who have made themselves available to help us with the kids, so they take them off of our hands to help. So that gives us an opportunity to kind of just get our work done and everything like that. And and Lori's reaching out to us and she's saying hi. And also my oldest Jordan is with her, so she's saying hi.
Oh,
too.
Nice.
Hi Jordan. Hi Lori. Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. So how do you think we should do this, Gift? Do you want to start with the video just yet? Do you want to maybe intro the topic a bit?
maybe like we could ask the guys, like, in terms of, COVID, how has your mental health been, would you say?
Mm.
Time
That's a
of
good
COVID,
question.
before we
Who wants
jump
to
in,
jump on that first?
just to warm us up a little bit,
Yeah, good idea.
Joe, you want to handle this one first?
Sure. All right. Boy, well, I won't lie that it does take its toll, mentally in some ways. But to me, it feels like there's been a counterbalance to like all the ways in which feeling confined, and especially for the first couple of months of all this distancing and all this, like I think it can kind of stress you out a little bit and make you feel depressed. And but in my life, I've been able to spend, like, in the last few months, I spend more time with my children than I had the opportunity to, like, for their whole lives, like we bonded more than ever before, just because, like, when they're with me, they're here and I'm here. I'm just working from my computer, like, in the next room, you know what I mean? So that has been beautiful. I'm dreading losing that because it's making me aware of something that I've been missing. I've always longed for, like, more time with my children, but now it's like I appreciate it so much. I don't want to let go of that. There's a part of me that wants to figure out how I could just keep working from home.
Yeah.
And after we got control of COVID, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Randy?
Yeah. For me, I would say at the beginning, it was pretty chill because, working from home. And then I'm also kind of a person who enjoys being alone. So I'm a single guy. So like the first month or so, I was like, yeah, I can stay at home and do all that I want to do, catch up on all the Netflix binging and all that. So it was, the first little bit was like that. And then after a while, because we're all human and we want to have like interaction with other people, like real interactions. There's certain you can't make connections with people the same way via text or over the screen. There's something different about actually sitting with someone and having a conversation. So I guess for me, throughout the situation, there has been ebbs and flows where I've kind of been feeling a little bit more lonely than I'm used to. Or I think overall what I learned was, even though I am someone who enjoys being isolated, I do need to push myself to open up and make more actual friends and like connections with people, because I tend to not make those. I make a little small superficial connections. But during this time, people reached out to me, but I also reached out to other people to go to the park or go hang out and that sort of thing, which has helped. In general, obviously, not obviously, but in general, I'd say I've been doing well. But it was a good experience for me to take inventory of how I react in certain situations and to make the change of being more proactive to actually engage with people instead of being more of a sheltered recluse type guy.
Yeah, I get that. I guess I'll go next. For me, I think it was one of those things where, working from home, kind of like Joey said, and being able to spend more time with the kids, has been great. I think a little bit what has kind of put not a negative spin on it, but what makes it challenging at times is like, I just find it difficult when too much is scheduled, let's say at like lunch hours. Like I have a lot of lunch learn conferences and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, you guys got to understand that like I'm working from home and I need to spend this time with my kids. Like this is a time where we can sit down at the table and have that time together and stuff like that. And oftentimes, those calls that run through lunchtime, it's just like, okay, I need a breather. And I think the challenge with working in such a collaborative space like this is that there's a lot of bombardment, so it's the constant ringing of the phone, it's a constant this and that, and it's like you turn away for a second and you got like 5 messages that pop up sort of thing. And also I guess what has added to the challenge that I personally face is I'm working on multiple projects right now. So it's getting people to understand that like, okay, I'm taking time to do this right now, and whereas I guess when we're in the office space, people tend to know, okay, like he's really busy. They see you physically with somebody at your desk, so they understand that the dynamic is different. But so that's kind of that's how my experience has been. But I find what's kind of been helpful is, those moments that you do take with the kids where you're just like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to do something silly with the kids. So we'll have dance parties and, and stuff like that. And my wife likes to initiate those, and then I'll join in when the kids are not expecting it. And, for them to see their dad dance is fun and stuff like that. And like this past weekend, I went on a hike with the girls and with their Aunt Lori and stuff like that. We went. It wasn't even far out of Montreal, but it was just nice to kind of just see a change of environment and stuff like that. Yeah. And also, I find when I get to do things that are creative as well too. And it's funny because I do work in architecture, so you think that's a creative field, but it's not as creative as you may think, because a lot of it is gray zones and a lot of bureaucracy and all that type of stuff. But getting a chance to kind of just do something that changes my perspective on things. We have a question that came in from Busy Graham, who was wondering. Shout out to Busy. Thanks for watching the podcast. So we're from Montreal. I'm in the Saint Leonard part of Montreal.
Yeah, I'm in Montreal as well, Rosemont.
Nice.
Yeah, Joey. NDG over here.
NDG.
In Saint Lazare, which is just west of Montreal.
Yeah, so okay. It's not bad. That's not too bad. The thing is, it's funny because you don't realize how big Montreal is until you say to yourself, oh, I'm going to go see a friend in Saint Lazare, but you live like in the east end of town. And then what makes Montreal big is the traffic and the construction, especially that we're facing right now.
So vexing.
Yeah. Oh, so Busy's in Rigaud.
Hey, neighbor.
Oh, cool.
So you're Joey's neighbor. So hopefully you guys will bump into each other one day at the shopping center.
When my kids are with me, they're in Rigaud too.
Oh, cool.
That's where their mom's at.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, what is have you guys had any friends or family kind of like maybe point out when you've been in your kind of grouchier moods during this COVID period? Has anybody ever had to call you out and say, hey, look, I think you need to recenter yourself, focus, anything like that? Or have you guys noticed it?
This might not be a surprise for most of you, but yeah, I mean, I was short during the first month. Very short. I mean, keep in mind, I'm a bachelor, living in this batch pad.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm like Randy. I mean, I like my space, I like my space, but it's more like under my own terms, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yes. Not the imposed.
Not the imposed, you know what I mean? Like now I'm stuck with my beta fish here, we're bonding sometimes. It doesn't respond to me. It's a very, very, tough time sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I would take it out of my family and, be very short. What do you want? What is it? I don't know. I'm busy, So it's,
yeah. Count on an alpha like gift to have a beta fish. Sorry, dad jokes are my thing. That's another coping mechanism that I have, is making dad jokes at really inopportune moments. I'm not known to make a lot of dad jokes. Just kidding.
That's good.
So that's for me. But I've done better. After first month, I'm like cool as the breeze.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, Joey, I don't know if no one has called me out on being like short or a little bit grouchy. Like, I think for me, with my general disposition, that sort of stuff would be more internal. Like, I don't I wouldn't express it outwardly to other people, but I recognized within myself I was like being a little bit hard on myself in a lot of categories. I know maybe some of you are the artistic type, where we like to produce art, whether it's comedy, music, that sort of thing. And for some of us, if it goes unchecked, you become very self-critical. So I had, moments where I'm realizing, oh my God, I'm being very hard on myself in terms of what I have yet accomplished for the day or what I've yet accomplished in my life, you know, that sort of thing. And then, you know, Taylor Swift drops an album, and that makes me a little bit sad too. If you heard the album, is a little bit more, a little bit more gloomy in certain regards. So, you know, there's certain things like that where you have to take inventory of like even what you're consuming. Is what I'm consuming making me more in a negative sense, or is it actually uplifting me? It doesn't mean that that particular art is good or bad, but you have to prepare yourself mood wise in terms of what you're gonna ingest, so to speak, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think mine was more internal than outward.
Joe?
Well, to your question, the answer is no, not really. But the one who's caught my mood a couple of times is probably my girlfriend, Shoshana. But not directed at her.
Yeah. She's picked up on it.
Like she's, you know, like she gives me an ear. She vents it out. Whatever's been like bothering me throughout the week or the day, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in general, I mean, with people, you know, I usually keep my mood in check, like in person. And the internet gets my wrath later. So.
That's his. You go on those alt-right websites just to find somebody to just give it to, right?
No, I just give it to everybody in my personal, whoever's connected to me, log in and see what I posted and be like, damn.
I'll be honest with you. I saw one of those moments. I saw one of those. I won't disclose anything, but I saw one of Joey's moments this in the last little bit, especially with like a lot of the Black Lives Matter.
Oh yeah.
I was like, wow, Joe is still Joe.
Going in.
And you know, on that topic though, ironically, that was I think a period that I found it rough though, was and this is I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but sometimes in preparing for the podcast, the subject matter has been kind of heavy that we looked at, you know, like when we were looking at George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor incident and stuff like that. And as I've had to kind of like, you know, look for articles and try to get the facts down and stuff like that of these events, that has played a toll. And, you know, it's funny because as men of color, oftentimes that's something that ends up being overlooked is, you know, what is the consequence of a lot of this exposure that we have to negative things happening to our community, you know? But that's a topic that we're going to dive into a little bit later. But I think this is kind of a good point to show the video that we had lined up. So I'm just going to bring this video up. There you go. And let me just hit play.
Hello, my name is Wayne Felton, and I've been struggling in my mental health, and I also am a Christian. Those two things can happen. It is possible for both those things to happen. I can have a prayer life and study the Bible and worship and still be struggling with my mental health. And guess what? That would be consistent with characters in the Bible. So I'm in good company with David and Paul, and Jesus was sweating and so hard. He was so overwhelmed that he was sweating drops of blood. I mean, can we go through the Bible and look at this? So please do not tell people who are struggling to just pray or just read the Bible or just choose Jesus, because that's toxic, it's ridiculous, and it's not biblical. I wish that we would unhook that stigma around mental health in all the communities I'm a part of. Black community, being male, and being Christian, because we can't seem to deal with it in any of those three communities, and I'm here to just be real about it. Thank you.
So, a friend of mine sent me that video, and it hit me right away. And it's funny because we were debating, Dwight and I, as to when to have this episode, when to do this episode, and it was one of those things that I was putting off because I'm like, I feel like we almost need to have a professional here, and I'm going to take a moment just to say this. We are sharing our perspectives on mental health. We're not at all any professionals. Okay, we were just talking about our experiences with mental health issues. I will be posting though a few links to a few resources because I feel that it's really important that people know where to go and where to direct themselves or loved ones if they feel that they're struggling with those mental health, with any mental health issues or anything like that. It's something that's been stigmatized a lot, and it's something that people tend to shy away from. People don't want to be associated with having either a mental health issue or stuff like depression, and all this stuff gets over stigmatized a bit, like he was mentioning in the video. But I want this really to be an opportunity for people to share with their loved ones, and hopefully just open up the door to have the discussion that maybe you've been shying away from. Because as a community, we need to have this discussion, in my opinion, more often. And as human beings, I feel we need to have more compassion towards one another, regardless of our beliefs, regardless of all of the things that tend to divide us. I think we need to start understanding that at the core of who we are, we're all human beings, and we, surprisingly enough, live a lot of similar things, even though we are separated by a lot of nonsense. Anyways,
yeah.
So that being said, what I found interesting about the video was the fact that he didn't go on just to talk about being a Christian and the reactions that he's had as a Christian male from people when he's had moments of anxiety and so on and so forth. But it's also the fact that he talks about being Black and a male and how that has affected him as well too. And it's funny because there's that lack of understanding about these issues, about these topics within the community. And I'm sorry if I'm using the term issue. I actually want to try to get away from saying mental health issues, but it's unfortunately one of those things that's a lingo thing, because I don't want to, in saying mental health issue, make people feel like it's something that they need to feel bad about. Yeah. So what we want to talk about a few of the stigmas.
Yeah.
What stigmas have you guys heard when it comes to being a man and mental health?
And we'd like to hear both from the audience and also, of course, So audience, please send some stuff in the comments as well while Joey and Randy, discuss.
I can say so the question is what type of stigma or negative things you might have heard of associated with mental health from whatever community.
Whatever community, maybe things you've heard, things in like you've heard in your family growing up or stuff like that.
I think in general, the one that I can think of that's more on my mind is with regards to masculinity. It might just be because that's something that has always been an area that was curious to me. And also I majored in women's studies. So we talked a lot about, masculinity as well, and femininity, just gender issues. But in terms of masculinity, there was always this idea that to be masculine, it was just the whole toughen up dynamic. Just you gotta be tough, and you gotta if you're going through things, you can't show it. And I think that was the general sense of crying or expressing those type of emotions, at least in the communities I was around in, and not particularly just the Black community, but just masculinity in Canada. That was particularly frowned upon to overtly show emotion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I get you. And I think it's easy to say that all of us have kind of seen or heard those tropes, Joey?
Well, I feel the general population has a misunderstanding of what mental health issues are. And because of that, there's a lot of social standards that if you depending on how you come up, those social standards can get in the way of what you're trying to express. If you want to express something, but then you're a man and you're kind of taught to keep your emotions pent up and stuff like that, then you'll feel stigmatized if you come out, against that standard. and express yourself in the way that you're not expected to. So then people end up keeping it inside and bottling it up. I don't know why, but I'm getting emotional.
Yeah.
Having trouble getting words out. Anything specific. It's just like the whole topic is making me emotional.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's why my voice is like quivering now. All of a sudden, it's weird.
Well, Joey, this I don't want to say the cliche thing, but this is a place to talk about it, and I'm happy because I'll be honest with you, like, I've heard a lot of those same things too growing up, and even myself, like I'm known to be that person who's emotional. I wear my emotions on my sleeve and stuff like that, and it's tough, because you get people that tell you, oh, you need to toughen up, be stronger. Come on, you're stronger than that, And especially, this is going to sound silly, but being 6'5" and, teetering at 300 pounds, people look at you and say, oh, you're a big baby if you're somebody who's emotional. And it's like, this has nothing to do with my size. This has to do with just how I process things, how I internalize things. You know what I mean? Anyways, gift.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like growing up in Zimbabwe, which is very much like a very patriarchal society, like we were raised in a way where it's like showing any sort of emotion, you are perceived as weak, or you will never be considered a good role model within the family, right? Because the way that families are structured, it's like you have the father who's at the head, and then you have the siblings. So if like you're the oldest sibling, you're like the next patriarch, and you gotta show strength like your father does. Any sign of emotion is a sign of weakness, and you wouldn't be like a good next person in line to lead the family because you are emotional and considered weak. So growing up with that, it was hard because it's like whenever I would deal with like personal things, I would either like just like cry by myself and not like confide in anybody. And if my siblings saw me crying, I'm like, no, it's just my eyes burning. You know what I mean? So that I can show that I'm tough. So that was my experience, like at a very, very, very young age, growing up around like, mental health and like showing emotion. Yeah.
Another thing I think that is challenging, I think that men tend to face is this idea that if a man talks about their emotions, that they're playing victim. I don't know if you guys have heard that. I've heard that, and I have friends who've experienced that they've had that thrown in their face when they start to open up. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, sometimes people try to create a safe space for you to talk in, and then when you talk, it's like,
flip it back on you.
yeah, that's it. And unfortunately, people don't realize how damaging that is to somebody who it's not easy to make yourself vulnerable. That's the hard thing about talking about these types of topics, is that nobody likes to put themselves in a place where they feel that exposed. And, we try to build ourselves up and to be as strong as we possibly can to face life. We're told that that's really how we should go about life. And then all of a sudden you have somebody who takes what you've trusted them with and throws it back in your face, and that becomes extremely hurtful,
Yeah, I think directly related to the clip that we just saw, if we can like narrow it down a bit, I think the main issue I perceive, and it seems a little bit like what you guys are expressing as well, is that it's not that men in particular are, and this is just my reading of it, it's not that men in particular are told to not emote or be emotional. It's just that within certain barriers, it's okay. Like in the sports arena, you can be emotional, you can be really out there, you can cry if you lose in certain categories. That's considered appropriate masculine emotion. Yeah. But when we're talking about like particular mental health and like mental health issues, like maybe like depression or anxiety, those sort of things, like I've never gotten the idea that those things don't exist within man, and yeah, I never got that. But it was more so there's a critique on how you handle it, and the particular critique was you shouldn't, or it's weak to ask for help. I think that particular part of it is what for a lot of people can be very damaging, and particularly within the clip, like he mentioned, you know, as a Christian, maybe you're told to just pray it away, or that it doesn't exist if you're a good believer, which is very damaging. I think that's the part that is really the crux of it, is like mental health issues still will happen to you as a man, but you either have to like suppress it or just handle it. There's like no mechanism or appropriate way of asking for help.
I see you read ahead in our notes there, Randy. No, but we're sorry, we're going towards that for sure.
Okay,
you're gonna say it?
Yeah, like for me, like just one thing that I wanted to add, like for me it was twofold, right? It's like you're looking at mental health like as a man, and also for me it was like the disability layer also played into it, that you have a physical disability, so you are not man enough, right? So there was like this layer of where I had to compensate somehow. Since there's something that I cannot control, which is the physical disability, then I have to compensate in some way by suppressing my emotions, you know, suppressing my anger, you know, and not expressing what I am actually feeling,
yeah,
what I'm actually going through. And I'd say like that has had quite a negative impact even in like my adult relationships, where when it comes to expressing how I actually feel about something, I'll just be quiet. I'll just like shut down and just be quiet and just not say anything.
yeah.
So that's been my experience.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, you know. And it's funny that you mentioned about that need to overcompensate, because it's so, to me it's so obvious, you know, when you have a guy that is you know, somebody who may have, you know, certain things that they're dealing with, you know, with respect to their mental well-being, and they're trying so hard to act like they have it together, you know. It's like sometimes I almost feel like saying, okay, dude, you're not fooling anybody, you know. And I think because of maybe some of my own personal, I guess, bouts that I've had, you know, with my emotions and stuff like that, like I've tried to approach things with a level of sympathy and empathy, you know. So it's like, okay, sometimes I may see somebody react a certain way, and at first it may even irk me and may get me kind of, you know, riled up. But then I'm like, okay, there's got to be more to it that I don't understand. So like, let me give this person some room to understand, you know. And it's not everybody who's going to be able to have the I guess the willingness to say, okay, I'm in a bad spot right now. I need to just, you know, I need to let you know this, and like, let's reconvene at a better time, you know. It's not everybody who's able to do that. So that was, it was interesting to hear of the perspective. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add before we jump on maybe to the topic of being a Christian? And
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm curious if like you guys have heard the argument of like, oh, you got your boys, why do you need mental health? Why do you need therapy for? You got your boys to talk to, you got, you know, you got your fam. I mean, that's the argument that I've heard a lot, even with like friends who I have like suggested that they, you know, seek therapy for their mental health. Like, have you guys like heard this or experienced this?
I can't say I have, and that's partly just because, like, aside from like a certain period in time in college and university, I particularly my close friend group, if I had any, were mostly women. So I never really heard that coming from the women I was hanging out with. And then for me, just in general, with the male friend groups that I did have, the issue of like mental health or any of those sort of things, just like we never discussed it. I'm sure like there's probably certain period of times where, you know, a friend was going through a rough spot, but it was like something that was never really addressed. And maybe if it was like one-on-one with friends, but I can see that being, I've never experienced it, but I can see that being a thing. I just haven't heard that myself.
Joey?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that, but again, it comes to people just not really understanding what, you know, mental health issues are. So, you know, feeling like why would anyone want to seek help for this or that when you got your boys here, you have your friends, like you can always talk to me, you know. There's some people who feel like that, but if you don't feel comfortable talking to them about certain things because of attitudes that they have, like that one that's expressed when you say that, then it kind of nullifies that, you know. That's a social pressure that would discourage somebody from seeking help.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Because Terry.
No, go ahead.
Because like for me, I think like the gap that like people who refuse, like, you know, to seek therapy is that they forget that within your circle of friends or family, there's a lack of like neutrality, right? And they don't see therapists as doctors, right? So the argument of saying like, you know, I got my family, got my boys, it's the same argument as saying that when you are physically sick, you don't need to go see a doctor. You can just deal with just your natural home medicine and you'll be all right. You know what I mean? You can stitch up a wound with your own stuff. You know what I'm saying? That's the gap.
Yeah. A question I have, and not to stall it for moving on to the next point. Like I'm not like the most familiar, to be quite honest. And you mentioned this from the beginning, Terry, that we're not experts here. But with, for example, what people try to say in terms of like, well, you have your friends and you have your family, you can talk to us, that sort of thing. I don't, obviously there's situations where you need to see someone who's a professional, but I think from their perspective, it might be like a sincerity of really trying to help someone, of like, oh, I want to be there for you. I want to do the best that I can to help you. But I think maybe there needs to be more discourse or understanding of when, yes, this is something that you can see a professional or you should see a professional because you need help in this situation. But isn't there, or am I wrong? Isn't there certain circumstances where you're not in the best mental state, but you know, your friends and your family can actually help you? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do we find what that line is? Or
for sure, I think it's.
I don't think it's replacing one with the other. You know, I don't think it's one. They have to be mutually exclusive. You could have your community and your family and your people that you're close with, but having that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need to seek some kind of help outside of that as well.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry,
that makes sense to me.
No, it's fine. And the thing I think, so I've heard people say this. The reason why they hate therapy is because you go there and you feel like you're talking to somebody, but they're not telling you what to do. Okay? Now, if you flip that, that's also the thing I think that frustrates people the most about sometimes dealing with friends and family when they need to talk about something that's linked to mental health. Reason being that sometimes your friends and family are going to look with my kids. Okay, say my daughter scrapes her knee. Okay, now Joy, she's gonna pop right back up. My youngest, she's gonna pop right back up, dust it off, and be like, "I have a boo boo," and then she's gone. Jordan, she'll be telling 2 weeks from now. Okay, we're in the middle of doing something completely unrelated, and she'll be like, "Dad, you remember I fell and I hurt my knee? That was really bad." And she'll go on and on and on and on, right? Now, the thing about it is this. as parents, we're like, okay, we encourage our kids. I've said this a number of times on the podcast. We encourage our kids, come to us, tell us about the little things, because we want them to trust us with the little things, so that when they have the big things, they feel they can come to us,
Mhm.
But what happens sometimes too is, as a parent, you're in the middle of a million things, right? And what happens when your kid comes up with something like that they're thinking about, they're reflecting on what happened and how they felt in that moment. And then you may be like, okay, it's over though, right? So imagine that cycle continuing over and over again. And then you're a 30-something-year-old person, right, who every time you've been to your parents, you've been to your mom or dad to talk to them about something, they've kind of brushed it or dismissed it or belittled how it made you feel in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge about this topic in particular, is when you are okay, I'm going to dive deep into it. Okay.
Let's go.
So I personally had a burnout. Okay. 2014, I went to Tampa. I worked crazy hours. It was a really hectic period. I came back to Montreal, and it was, before I even had a minute to breathe, it was get back to the routine of life here now and everything like that. And work was just crazy. Everything was crazy. And I just hit that wall, that dreaded wall. And for me, the moment where I knew something was up was one day I was getting ready to go to work, and I put on my shirt, I had on my boxers, and I was putting on my socks before I put on my pants. And I put on one sock. And then to put on the next sock felt like I had to move the earth. Like, I felt like it was the most insurmountable thing. I felt like somebody was asking me to climb Everest to put on the next sock. And I was like, why is it so difficult to put on my bloody sock? It's something you do without even thinking, right? But it was just like everything in that moment was just like, you need to just take today for yourself. You need to just, and I remember, like, it took me forever to actually come to grips with it and say, okay, I'm going to send an email to work and say, look, I can't come in today. I got to take the day for myself. And then a little while later, my wife suggested, she's like, I think you need to go see your doctor and, just find out, like, if he thinks you may be experiencing a burnout. And a burnout sets off a ton of red flags for a lot of people, because they're like, you should be able to cope with the stress of work, the work balance situation, blah, blah, blah. And employers like to pride themselves on having a workplace that is stress-free, and they feel like they're accommodating. But the thing is, the company culture is one thing, but then the individual culture of who you're dealing with specifically can be very different than the company culture. And, so sometimes these things play into it. So, I had taken some time. And for me, it was anybody who knows me knows I'm a workaholic to a certain degree. When I get into something, I like to dive into it all the way. That's why I'll spend crazy hours working on things like I did last night for the podcast. But it's just because for me, it's like, it's something I'm passionate about. But all of a sudden, things started to just turn gray. So something that brought me joy didn't bring me joy anymore. I love playing music. I love playing the drums, but it was a routine. It was something I was doing for somebody else. And it no longer felt like I was doing anything because I wanted to do it. I just was doing things out of obligation to people because I felt I couldn't let people down. And that was like my experience. And that was my moment where I had to realize, like, okay, this mental health thing that they talk about is real. You can't go on neglecting the red flags that pop up, because, for instance, at first I would wake up in the middle of the night and it's like my mind is just racing about problems that I'm trying to solve with things at work. And I'm like, then it would take me a while to fall back asleep, and it's just like, that's weird. But I would ignore it, and I forget where I was going with this.
Oh, no, I get it.
But, so, and the thing about it is, like, culturally, just depending on who I spoke to about the situation, some people were telling me, you just need to forget about work. Just drop it. Just stop thinking about work. But it's like, that's not necessarily the solution, because I had been somebody who prided myself on being, like, super efficient and knowing everything about what I needed to know in terms of the tools and procedures and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, I just felt shaky. I felt like I wasn't myself anymore, and you lose your confidence, and you start feeling like you're not in a position to be at your peak performance that you're used to, and that's hard. That's hard for a lot of people to adapt to, And it took me a while, and it's crazy. I think this is the last thing I'm going to share, and then I'll let you guys know. But one thing that happened when I was in Tampa that was silly was when my wife and I were preparing to come down, because I had been there for 2 weeks prior to get things set up and get things in motion with finding an apartment and all this stuff. And then my wife was joining me after 2 weeks, so I had to fly back to Montreal and then come back down with my car. And silly little thing, but like the office manager where I was insisted that I had to check out of my hotel room. He wasn't going to pay for the 2 days for me to fly to Montreal to drive back down, even though I was coming back to stay in the same hotel that I was in before. So he's like, you would have to leave. You have to take all of your stuff with you. Now, I had brought down extra bags of my clothes because I'm moving here anyways, right? So then I had to take all my stuff and lug it to the hotel and leave it. And I asked him, can I leave my bags here with you guys while I go to Montreal? And I'm going to come back anyways to the hotel. And they're like, cool, we totally understand. And they had a lot of people that were in kind of a transitory period like I was, so they were like, cool, we understand. So I did that, and that was something that had marked me about that experience of going to work in Tampa. I come back to Montreal, okay? It's almost a year later. We went on probably one of the greatest vacations that I've had. We went to Prince Edward Island. Lori came with us, and Jordan was born at the time. Fabi, my wife, was pregnant with Joy at the time. And we had a blast. Prince Edward Island, we had superb weather. We met super cool people. It was nice. It was honestly we didn't know what to expect in going to Prince Edward Island, but we had a great time. And it was also the Confederation, so it was the 150th anniversary. So everything was super festive there. We chose the prime moment to go. Vacation finishes, we're driving back to Montreal, and we decide to stop in Lévis because we just were like, okay, let's go to Quebec City, and then after that we'll continue back to Montreal. And we checked into the hotel, and I forgot to get a bag from the car that Jordan needed. So I go down from the hotel, go to the vehicle to get the bag, and as I'm walking back, I had a moment that hit me where it was I felt like I was back in that moment in Tampa where I was doing this silly thing with having to bring my bags of clothing to the front desk to leave it with them. And I was just it ruined, momentarily it ruined my vacation, and it was automatically all of the things that had pissed me off about my time in Tampa just flew back in my face, And it took a while for me to be able to get past that. And I'm not 100% past it, but I think I'm in a better place than I was back then for sure, But people underestimate what it is to have a difficult moment like that, where I think if I was to define it, I'm not a professional again, but I think that's probably PTSD, from the work experience, from the hostility of the work experience that I had. And you come to realize that hey, that was not cool. What I experienced wasn't cool, but at the time people were telling me, look, man, just forget about it. Okay. It happened. It was 2 years of your life, life goes on, you won't even remember that, but it's to me, I lived it, and that's all that to say, that's the problem or the challenge sometimes with speaking to family about these things is when they nullify friends or family. I shouldn't say just family, friends or family. When they nullify your experience. And a therapist, at least I think a good therapist, would not nullify. They would listen to what you have to say and give you the room to feel what you're feeling. And that's what therapy is about, I think.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That makes sense.
Sorry for the long-winded answer.
Oh, no, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, this also reminds me of... Oh, sorry, George, go ahead.
I just said I completely agree. Yeah, go ahead, Gift.
Yeah, this reminds me of three experiences that I personally had. So my first experience dealing with depression was when my father died. Right, I was like 18 years old, like just graduated from high school, and I'd planned to go back to Zimbabwe to visit him and everything. And like, keep in mind that like my father and I, we didn't have like a very good relationship growing up, so it was kind of like a moment for us to kind of like patch things up and start a fresh sort of deal. And when he passed away, like I just like stayed in my mom's house. I just like stopped going out. I stopped like seeing people. I was just like shut down. And I remember like a teacher in college in CJEP was like, "You seem like you are not here every time you come to class. You seem like you are elsewhere." And that hit me so hard. I was like, what? And that was like the first time I actually seek therapy. And it was so secretive too. I didn't even tell my family. I saw like a therapist within college, within Dawson. And that really helped tremendously. And then after those sessions, I was like, okay, I think like next time I deal with this, it's going to be easier for me to dive back into therapy if I go through something tragic. But no, second time around is I got mugged downtown. Two teenagers like grabbed my arms and they stole my phone. And at the moment, like, I was just shooken up and I was just like, what just happened? This is like St. Catherine. You guys know St. Catherine Street. It's a relatively busy street. I was in St. Catherine Blurry. And at that moment when they attacked me, there was not too many people around because I was waiting for my taxi. There was not many people around. So they grabbed my arms, took my phone, disappeared. And following the few days, I was always scared of standing on intersections because I felt exposed. And every time I'll be in a public place, I would want to like park my chair against the wall or against something where I could see everything. And the moment where I realized that this was bad is I was with a friend, and my friend was like, why do you do this? Why do you go against the wall when we're in public, when we're just like idle? I'm like, well, I need to see like everyone who's coming in every direction so that I'm not blindsided. And he's like, why is that? I'm like, well, because when I was marked, this is what happened. And anyone who was getting close to me on an intersection, I would just like twitch. And at the moment, I seek therapy again. And, this was not the first time seeking therapy, but I thought it was going to be easier because I'd already sought therapy in the past. But this is just to show you how internalized the stigma is, even like as much as sometimes you may like be believing in the system, is just to show you like the amount of like power that stigma has on people, that's like, it's really important like to keep each other like in check and like to support each other in these phases, and then like lastly, I promise I'm almost done. Lastly, my last experience was I'd gone on an exchange for 6 months in Australia. Life was great. Everything was exciting. New experiences every day, adventures. And then I came back to Montreal. Now, keep in mind, when I was in Australia, I was able to take the metro whenever I wanted because most metro stations are accessible. I was able to take a bus. I was able to do things spontaneously without having to plan ahead of time what I'm going to do the next day. So coming back to Montreal in December, which is wintertime,
Oh man.
you know, end of December, and dealing with, you know, the fact that metro stations, not all metro stations are accessible, and dealing with the fact that I need to use adaptive transit, which requires for you to book your trips a day in advance. That completely paralyzed me. Paralyzed me. Yeah. Like I just graduated, there was nothing going on. I didn't have a job lined up, and nothing was exciting anymore. And I was not able to just leave whenever I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I remember, so in January, a friend invited me out for a birthday dinner because my birthday is in December. So beginning of January, my friend wanted to take me out for my birthday. I kid you not, guys. I showed up in a onesie in a fancy restaurant.
Wow. Wow.
Like you guys know me.
I know.
In terms of like, you know, fashion and, you know, looking good all the time.
Yeah, no, Gift puts it together well, man.
You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like a fancy restaurant. And my friend wasn't, my hair was not combed, nothing. Like, I just showed up. And my friend was like, is this a joke? I'm like, what?
Oh, man.
Like, do you realize where we are? I felt so bad, guys. That moment, that's when I seek therapy again.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Why would you credit anyone to like let you get dressed up to go to something like that somehow?
You know what I mean? Like,
you know, like to arrange to have your clothes be there or something. So,
dude, I just didn't care because either wearing onesies or tracksuit was the most comfortable for me because that's what I was wearing at home. Like that was like my comfy clothes, and going out, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh, I feel comfortable, you know.
just to help you through this moment, Gift.
Busy. Thanks, Busy. Thank you.
Well, Gift, you know what? You are the reason why I wear a button-up shirt. I don't know people that know me. I was like, you know what? I'm always looking like I'll just one on this thing, so I'll just put on a shirt.
I'll be honest with you. Even when I was going through when I was making the little intro video last night, I'm going through pictures of Dwight and Gift and everything like that, and I'm like, man, I don't have a picture that matches these guys. These guys have such nice pictures of themselves, so that's why my picture's not there.
That's hilarious.
Best picture.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll be working on that video and I'll edit it at one point and add myself in. But you see, and Gift, I can understand and I can relate to that sentiment because it's hard. People don't realize sometimes how hard it is when you're going through an episode like that to do the simple little things, you know? Like, now, look, I will not by a long shot say that I'm somebody who has had it the worst end of the spectrum when it comes to either anxiety or depression. But like I've heard and I've read accounts of people who are like, look, man, I've been in my room for 3 days and all I do is I just order food and have it dropped off and I haven't brushed my teeth, I haven't combed my hair, you know what I mean? And like, you know, I consider myself to be somewhat of an introverted person. Like I love to be in my bubble, you know? But like I've read some accounts of some people and like when they've had it at their worst, I'm like, man, I don't think I could cope with that, you know? So I get where you're coming from. You know, I definitely get where you're coming from. So we were going to go on to the topic of some of the stigmas that you hear as like within the faith, as you know, as a Christian. And I'm sure maybe some of these things, Joey, you've probably heard too. But like Randy, you mentioned it a little bit earlier. You know, the feeling that like it's a lack of faith. Actually, sorry, Joey, did you? I kind of skipped ahead. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that part of the discussion?
Oh no, I'm starting to get curious about where we're going next. So.
Oh, okay, no. So okay, cool. So yeah, talking about like some of the stigmas that you hear kind of within the Christian community of mental faith, and like so I've personally heard stuff like, it's a lack of faith, or it must be because you have some big spiritual problem that, that you're sad, you're experiencing the sadness or stuff like that. And I've even heard people like talk about people with like severe cases of depression, and just say some stuff that's like not even biblical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have grown up hearing any of these things.
I did actually.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. I want to hear this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I come from a family where both my parents ended up working in mental health.
Okay.
So in our household, that was something, my parents are very devout Christians. That was acknowledged, so I didn't grow up in a household that put that kind of pressure on, or possibly in some ways, but they had a solid grasp of,
mm-hmm.
mental illness and depression and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first churches, I think it was the second church that we started going to after my family became Christian. That pastor used to teach, he used to teach things that, like, basically that worry was a sin. So if you're worrying about something, then you're sinning because you're not, I guess, depending on God to, execute His will and have it come out the best way possible. And he had like a kind of logic that he used. So he was the first person that I that gave that had a message that was kind of like along those lines. And that from that extended, like mental health issues, all these things were like shortcomings of like have something, like they always were connected to some kind of sin that you must have in your life that is bringing about these things. If you deal with
hidden sin.
And if you deal with those sins, then those things will get, they'll fix themselves, kind of, But that's not, and I've encountered that, like people that kind of follow a doctrine that has that kind of line of thinking over the years. But most of the people that I, that I was friends with in the church and all that stuff didn't really seem to take that approach. I guess with, my family working in that industry, it would be hard to hang out with people that are skeptical about anything, mental illness and all that, and they just want to think it's demonic or it's sin or whatever. So, yeah, I did encounter a lot of that, but thankfully not in my home.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I don't think I could say I encountered that as well in my experience. The one thing I would say is like biblically, there are scriptures and things that you can use in terms of biblical principles that can help you with your mental health. Even just like, prayer, meditation, and even things about controlling your thoughts. There's a bunch of things in the Bible, and I'm sure within a lot of other religions or religious texts that are things that are in there, particularly to help support you with mental health issues. So I guess the only part that I can say I can sort of relate is I have been around certain people who mistakenly think if you apply those principles, that is the be all and end all. You just need the Bible to cure you. And if you're going outside of that, then you're either not believing correctly or there's something wrong with you. I've kind of heard that those type of ideas expressed, not to the extent that, that you're sinning or it's demonic or anything, but I've heard kind of like people insinuate that if you are applying these biblical principles, then you shouldn't need to go to a mental health professional, which is incorrect in the sense of, like you mentioned it, if someone has a cold, we don't get mad at them for going to see a doctor or getting medication for a cold. There's obviously things that can help you biblically and can help you through that situation. But if you're taking personal inventory of how you're feeling and how it's working, and you still need further assistance, then yeah, go ahead. Or, it's kind of like what we're talking about with family and friends. If you're at a situation where you're feeling certain things and you're out of it, then yeah, talk to your family and friends. And if you realize and you recognize, oh, this needs further attention, there shouldn't be, but there is a stigma for seeking for help.
Mm-hmm. And it's good that you mentioned that, because I'll be honest with you, like in church contexts, I've seen both sides of the spectrum. So I've seen like Joey's mentioned, where people say they equate it to a spiritual problem, they equate it to a lack of faith and this and that. But then I've started to see a change in church culture where some people are starting to acknowledge, and some people are bringing on staff mental health care professionals, and they themselves, some pastors, because unfortunately the reality is a lot of pastors used to feel that they were a counselor or a therapist, but now a lot of them are bringing professionals on board to help them figure out when do I need to send somebody, direct somebody. So I see that as a good step, in church culture and everything like that. Because what I have also seen in the past is I've seen sometimes where people have been kind of set aside or shunned, or even their families have been shunned, because there must be, sometimes like all these, like, it's funny. We don't like to talk about superstitions in church.
Okay.
Right? We shouldn't believe in superstition. But if you were to look at like some like deep Black cultural superstitions on, like that person must be into this, voodoo, this, that, whatever, right? And then the church is like, well, that person must have a generational curse. It's like, okay, you guys are talking about kind of the same thing. You know what I mean?
That kind of talk happened in my house.
That person's working Obia, right, Joey?
Sorry?
Obia?
Generation. Well, I don't know where my folks stand on that kind of thing these days, but like back when I was growing up, as a teenager, they got on a thing, like a philosophy, at least for a period of time, where they believe in generational curses, like the sin of the grandfather can negatively impact the life of the son and then the grandchild, unless you come and find it and break it. So I remember they used to talk about that. And looking back on it now, like being on the outside of all that, it's a curious thing to consider how like my parents reconciled their professional training about mental health with also some of their spiritual interpretations of things to do with mental health. I remember my father used to say that he can discern the difference between something that's demonic or something that's like, in somebody's head. And I didn't really, when I was in it, I didn't think too much of it. I was just like, oh, I guess being a nurse in this field makes him see a different angle about all this. But looking back on it, I'm kind of like more skeptical. It might have all been mental health issues. Even, I don't believe in demons. So, my perspective just seems like, how did you separate one from the other?
It's funny because it's like, we should look at the obvious cues sometimes. The Bible has a book called the Book of Lamentations, right? You look at David. David was sad, for a period of time. You look at Saul. Saul had his moments of rage and jealousy and all this stuff. And it's like, we tend to think because of the cloak of faith and Christianity that we are exempt from the things that normal people go through. Yet we don't realize that we are exactly the same cut, cloth, make as everybody that we encounter, that we deal with. And a big part of us living our faith as Christians is to understand where people were, and I can't help but stress this enough, but you look at Jesus. Jesus went to people. He didn't expect people to come to him. He got off of the donkey and went up to Matthew, who was up in a tree. I hope I, me and my Bible quotes, sometimes I'm a little rusty, but all these things, like, he went to the woman at the well. He didn't expect her to come to him. You know what I mean? And that's how I think as Christians need to understand our relationship towards people. You know what I mean? And I wish sometimes we would think that way first before speaking. But way too often we speak and we say things, and it's like, then you end up having to do damage control and pick up the pieces, and then, so we were at the 1 hour mark, but we did want to at least, and maybe we'll continue this will be a to be continued episode, but we also want to talk about the Black community. And as people of color, I talked about it a little bit, you know, kind of the things that we experience that influence or that shape our mental well-being as Black people. And, you know, so first of all, there's some of the stigmas that we mentioned before, but especially, and I'm speaking from the perspective of as a Black male, there's an added level of Black men don't cry. Black men are stronger. And even when you look at how we're treated, quote unquote, by police and treated by, you know, the people that tend to attack us sometimes, you know, you should be able to withstand 9 minutes of me on your neck, you know, and I know that that's a physical thing, but that's also a very, very, it's a metaphorical thing I find too, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's one of those things where, unfortunately, because of our skin color, sometimes it's a Black male who may be emotional, who's experiencing some emotional distress. You may be automatically assumed to be violent or automatically assumed to be a threat. And it's like, how about I'm just a guy who had a bad day today, you know, because something happened at work, or, you know, maybe I'm having trouble making ends meet. You know what I mean? How about those types of things affect us too, you know? I don't know if you guys have any personal experience or anything you want to share regarding that.
I think being Black in a white society, you know, we're all probably at a higher risk, you know, of having mental health issues, because there's a lot of things that we're asked to just kind of take and accept, and microaggressions and news about us being killed and experiences we have getting pulled over by police and all these things that accumulate day after day. You know what I mean? Like, if people in a demographic that doesn't experience that, like if they have mental issues from the type of stresses that they have going on in their lives and all that, like we have all those same stresses and the race thing on top of it. You know what I mean? So I feel like, and then we kind of culturally, and we might be moving away from it now, like the more knowledgeable we get, but you know, it's still kind of ingrained that, you know, to be tough and to, you know, I was just watching a sitcom with my kids, and it's the running joke, you know, like the dad has, it's Blackish, you know, he's got the granddad has an old fashioned way of raising the kids, and the dad is kind of in between the old fashioned way and like more like, you know, healthy ways of raising his kid. And the dad's always putting a pressure on him, like, no, you don't have a conversation with your son. You don't talk about feelings. Like, that's weird. You don't, you know, the granddad always frowns upon that. And then you know, the dad is kind of being pulled between his dad and his wife, who wants to do things more, you know, kind of differently with the kids. Yeah. That kind of,
the more organic homeopathic way of doing things.
Yeah. Right, you know, but that pressure, like, so if you have a community where like we're experiencing a lot more microaggressions, where we have a lot more pressures added to us that could affect our mental health, and then we have a culture where we don't feel, you know, where we feel like it's a sign of weakness if we seek help or even admit to any of it. You know what I mean? Like, I think we put ourselves in a position where we could suffer from that kind of thing a lot more.
Yeah.
You know?
I think to add to that, it's like within the Black community, it's like, okay, Black men is not perceived as experiencing mental health, or that if they do, right, there's either generational curses or voodoo or juju, whatever, what have you, right? I think that plays a double-edged sword. And what I mean by that is, like, when it even comes to other folks seeing us, they perceive us as not qualifying to experience mental health illness, right? And as a result, we are just perceived as quote unquote wild. Yeah.
And it's
a final double standard.
It's a double standard. Yeah, exactly.
So just to show you how wild my mind is. So when you said when they see us, I thought of that documentary when they see us.
Oh,
And then you say how they perceive us to be wild. And that was exactly
yeah.
a term that was created. The term wildin', right, was a term that was created to define the Central Park Five. And that was a term that was used to publicize or to put terror into everybody, to get everybody to align themselves with thinking these young men should be executed for this crime that they were being accused of.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so crazy that we live in a world that can look at us as human beings and say that we are not human beings. We don't exist as part of this society. We don't exist in a way where we contribute to this society. And I'm tempted to show this video or whatever, but it's a bit long and we're getting, I think, closer to the point where we want to wrap up. But it's from, essentially, it was a donkey of the day. I listened to Charlemagne the God and the Breakfast Club, you know, very often. And there was this politician. They're saying that he's like a political hopeful for 2024. Okay, and he made some wild statements saying how we need to understand that slavery was a necessary evil. Sorry. You know, and it's like, imagine that you have African Americans who are serving in the military to defend this country, right? Where people are saying things like, your ancestors, we needed your ancestors to be treated the way they were treated for our well-being. And you have to digest these things. Yeah, he's a senator. Yeah, and he's lining himself up. He's like the hopeful that the GOP has for 2024. You know, and you listen to this and you think to yourself, how can Black people exist in a society that views them and treats them this way? And then how can you not expect there to be a sense of fear, a sense of anxiety, a sense of all of these things that are associated with mental health, right? When you're constantly being treated this way. And I understand what people are going to say, and people are going to say, Black people are resilient and we're stronger than this and we should stand. But you know what? We've been standing for like 400 years plus. And you know what I mean? And it's an ongoing thing. And so people deliberately go out of their way. And I understand, you know, you can tune out social media, you can tune out news, you can tune out this, you can tune out that. But the problem is that there's too many people tuning in that are tuning in and listening to what he has to say and agreeing with him. Mm-hmm. And that reflects how they treat Black people in the streets. That reflects how they treat you in jobs. That reflects how they treat your children at school. That reflects how the police officers are going to approach your children when they're in the park playing like other kids. You know, but because your kid has a plastic gun, you have to be more worried about how they're going to respond to your child. You know, and there's like a list. I remember it's sad to say, but like there's a list of toys that my wife and I have like excluded our kids from playing with because we're like, we don't want to ever give them the impression that, you know, this is okay to play with because it could be perceived negatively. And it's like, although a little white kid is going to play with a gun and that's no problem, you know, it's a little toy gun, you know. It's like, this is the world we live in. We have to take all these extra precautions all the time as people of color. And that takes a toll on you. You know, you're constantly living in this fight or flight response?
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight response, you know, and that takes a toll on our stress levels. It takes a toll on us physically as human beings, you know, and that's oftentimes overlooked and not acknowledged, you know.
Yeah, and the way it takes its toll on us also impacts the way we're perceived. Yeah, you know, because if you have that on your shoulders all the time, and then you just don't have time for somebody's BS, you know, and it comes out. Then it's like, well, you know, these people they're ungrateful, they're angry all the time. They're, you know, why do they fly off the handle all the time?
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, listening to all that you guys have discussed regarding the Black element of it, I completely agree. The only thing I can kind of add and it was briefly touched upon, is like what you mentioned about tuning out, like tuning out social media and tuning out this and that. And for me, I tend, especially more recently since it's been on the news so much, it's probably, well, just I know for myself personally, I can't watch that. It's just like it's too much, especially just the amount of different things that are going on, and we all have our own personal lives that we're dealing, with our own issues that are very personal to us, and then to add on top of it these ongoing things about race in the United States and in Canada, like you mentioned, it can take a toll on you. And for me, I have to do that in small doses because I know I won't feel good. For me, issues of race in particular are something that kind of like really hit a nerve with me. So I have to watch out how much I consume of that. But to that same point is, unfortunately, I find, and particularly in white culture, they expect us to not react to that. Like you're supposed to not be the angry Black person or not be this and that, where you're not understanding that is a little bit, yeah, I could use the term privilege for someone who's not Black to see all that and then just brush it off. But if you are Black, you see yourself reflected in this, and you see your parents, your sister, it could be you and all that. And you have your own personal life experiences on top of it that mirror what is being discussed. And, someone saying something like it being a necessary evil, slavery being a necessary evil, if you're not connected with that history, is easier for you to just say, oh man, that guy said something really bad, and move on with your day. But if you have some type of connection to that, that really hurts, and you have to just ingest that. And it seems to me that a lot of times in society, you're expected to just take it and not, if you say anything and if you tweet something about it or something like that, people are going to look at you wild. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you reacted. It's like, it's been going on for so long. You don't expect me to have a reaction or a feeling towards this. I guess basically what I'm saying is just it's in terms of mental health, I think every person who's part of a marginalized group, and in specific, we're talking about Black men, are expected to receive this, quote, let's say stimulus, and just sit put. And if you do anything that is rebellious or you speak out about it, it is seen as negative, and that has a toll on our mental health, is basically how I sum it up.
Yeah. I definitely agree, 100%.
Yeah.
That it's good to have like a community, you can come home to and close the door and like shut the rest of that out. For like a lot of my growing up was the opposite. I grew up in white space, like primarily white as like the person my age of color, with maybe one or two peppered in like over the years. And what you just described is every day, at school, at like the soccer practice, and music, and even when you come home at night, because even in my home, like this thing that even the most well-intentioned white person just doesn't grasp about what you experience as a Black person, and so even at home, you kind of had to coddle a white person in a sense, I
got you. Yeah, and for a particular example, without getting too specific, because it's not necessarily my story, but I think it highlights what I'm trying to get across. Is my dad, he's not the most vocal on these race issues or something like that, but recently, and he's experienced a lot of stuff, but recently he had a certain experience, and he was vocal about it, and he said something about it. And then someone who's like close to us, who's white, was talking to him about it, and he just offhand, and I know this person to be a good person, but he probably doesn't just understand what he said, but just offhand, he said, the world is unfair, and you're never going to be able to get rid of systemic racism in the world. And that's just like a statement where you can have the argument of whether that statement is true or not. But just to say that to someone who is experiencing racism, and particularly systemic racism, to say to him that, oh, it's something that's in the world and there's no way you can ever eradicate it, that is very harmful in the sense of the status quo. Sometimes people don't understand when they're defending, oh, that's just the way that's just the way the things are. When you're defending the status quo, you have to understand that it's easier for you to defend the status quo when you're in a position where you benefit from the way things are. But the way things are right now for other people is not very good. So that's why you see them marching or doing things or getting attention, because the status quo, the way things are, is detrimental to certain groups. So even though for me, the way things are don't affect me, or it doesn't affect me that much, it is still very harmful for the people who are experiencing it. And you can say that about a lot of issues, like whether it's, and it happens a lot, like as a Black person, I'm sure you've probably heard people say or try to compare it with the way things are. It's like, oh, this is the best place to live as a Black person in North America in this day and age. This is the best time to be Black because you're not experiencing X, Y, and Z, which is true, but still doesn't mean the stuff that I'm currently experiencing is not terrible and I want to get rid of it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I was just thinking about like what Giff was talking about too, coming back from Australia and then coming back to Montreal, where all the public transportation isn't accessible the way it is over there, and like every city should make the public transit accessible, right? And the type of arguments that they make against that kind of thing is just like you're saying, like it's just very easy to just like defend the status quo and be like, it's going to cost too much to do a job like that, or it's that's just the way things are, and just accept it because they're not experiencing the challenges that not having accessibility poses to them, and so it's just very easy to just dismiss it and brush it aside.
I think this is what we need to do as a community. I think when people come to us with that type of energy, what we should do is say, why can't you guys do better? Why can't you guys treat us better? Why can't you guys treat us with respect like human beings?
Better than my break their nose first, but that definitely.
Trust me, Joey. I'm getting to the point where I just don't have the energy anymore.
No.
But like,
I saw everyone laughing. I'm like, oh yes, that was a joke.
I think that's what we need to do as a community. Is when we get thrown this type of stuff and say our behavior, quote unquote, is a problem. We need people to start to look at how are they contributing? How has the white community contributed? And just to touch on the topic of what you said, Randy, people say, well, look, you're in Canada, and Canada is a better country to be in, blah, 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 as a Black person. But look at how they're still pillaging Africa.
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason why it's difficult for African countries to get it together. And it's not because African countries can't do it, but it's because in Africa, there are so many people with different interests that are tearing the country apart for their own benefit. You know what I mean? And this gets in the way of the development of this country. And it's not just Africa. This is India. This is parts of Asia. Like all throughout Asia, you see this. You see people are getting completely taken advantage of, and you can't say anything because somehow we live in this warped society where to call out racism, to call out prejudice, to call out isms is the ism itself. Ironically, very ironically, I woke up this morning, I went through my Facebook feed, which I shouldn't do on mornings.
Don't.
And I saw somebody that I know, that Giff, Joey, and I all know very well, who in a blog was talking about cancel culture. And was...
Now I should think I know who you're talking about, even though who I'm thinking of.
And this person was talking about cancel culture and how... how the toxicity comes from people who only have something to say on your Facebook feed when they want to be combative about something that you're thinking or something that you post or whatever, but they don't even take the time to reach out to you to find out how you're doing. And what is so ironic about this was that the person in question has been only ever interacting with me on my feed because they've been in complete disagreement with something that I may have posted or a sentiment I may have shared. You know, so it's just funny that, like, oftentimes there's this thing of calling the pot calling the kettle hot, you know?
Yeah, man.
Anyways, on that note, I think we're gonna conclude. But thank you very much, guys, for joining us tonight for covering this topic. I know that it hasn't been necessarily very easy at times to share certain things because it's, you know, these are kind of fresh wounds sometimes. But I think as a community and as men in particular, just because we're four men talking about this topic tonight, it's important for us to continue to keep this dialogue going, you know, and we don't want to, we want to take a moment to also acknowledge the fact that, you know, mental health within the Black female community is something that is also extremely, extremely, it's a very hot topic, and it's something that we would love to have been able to approach, but unfortunately today it just didn't work out that way. But we hope in the future to maybe do another episode talking about mental health, part 2, where we get the experience from some of our sisters who go through, you know, their own bouts and their own, I guess, negative stereotypes and so on and so forth. But also, globally, this is a topic that everybody faces. So, in my closing words, I guess my thing would be, I would like for everybody to just try to show compassion, because you never know what somebody may be going through. That person who may have been rude, who may have brushed you off, you don't know what they may have been going through and where their mental state is. If you have loved ones who may be going through issues with mental health, take a moment to try to understand where they're coming from. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen. You don't have to have something to say. Sometimes just being there to listen and hear them is what they need. So thank you guys very much for joining us tonight. Thank you everybody for watching. And please share this video with your friends, like and follow our podcast. And we hope to keep being able to put out stuff like this, you know. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you all for watching as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. For all your openness, everybody.
No worries. Anytime, guys. Take care.
Have a good night.